He was arrested for fraud, his documents were torn apart, and he was humiliated, all without anyone knowing he was the new governor. When the truth came to light, the aftermath shook the town and the system to its core. What happened next will astonish even the most seasoned observers. But let's start at the beginning. Walter Jameson pulled his car over to the curb near a municipal building to check his mail. The recent election had made him the state's first black governor, but his official inauguration was still a few weeks away. Dressed inconspicuously and driving an unassuming car, Walter had chosen to forego his security detail to personally understand the needs of his district. Officer William Cross, known for his strict enforcement of the law, was sitting in his patrol car nearby. Spotting a man stepping out of an expensive vehicle, Cross's suspicion was instantly piqued. Cross approached Walter, quickly categorizing him as suspicious. "License and registration," he demanded sternly, scrutinizing Walter with a hard stare. Walter, slightly surprised but calm, handed over his documents without a word. Cross glanced at the papers, his brow furrowing. "Fake registration," he snapped, tearing the papers in front of Walter. "Do you think I can't tell who you are? You're a fraud." "This is a mistake, officer," Walter replied steadily, maintaining his composure. "Look again. Those are my documents." But Cross wasn't listening. Instead, he grabbed Walter's arm, slapped handcuffs on him, and shoved him roughly into the back of the patrol car. Passers-by began to take notice of the strange scene. One young man, holding his phone, exclaimed, "Hey, that's our new governor!" The word spread quickly. Others began filming the event, shouting at the officer that he was making a mistake. Cross, however, waved the crowd off. "Disperse! Don't interfere with police work!" Walter, seated in the patrol car, remained silent, but his gaze revealed a mix of calm resolve and smoldering intensity. He understood that this misunderstanding was about to escalate into something much larger. The patrol car carrying Walter Jameson made its way to the station. William Cross, satisfied with his catch, muttered under his breath as he glanced at Walter through the rearview mirror. "Your little con is over, pal," he said, turning his head slightly. "You think a fancy car and a suit will make us believe you're a law-abiding citizen?" Walter didn't reply, his cold, calm gaze fixed on the officer. Meanwhile, footage of the arrest began gaining traction on social media. Local journalists rushed to the station, and members of the public demanded answers. When the patrol car pulled up at the station, a crowd had already gathered outside. People were shouting, demanding that Walter be released. Some recognized the governor and tried to explain to the officers that Cross had made a grave mistake. Cross ignored the commotion, escorting Walter inside. "You're under arrest for falsifying documents," Cross stated curtly, seating Walter in a holding cell. "You can stay silent, but it won't help you." Suddenly, Cross's desk phone rang. It was the police chief, and his tone was sharp. "William, explain to me right now why the governor of the state is in custody." Cross, stunned, stammered into the phone, his tone defensive. "It's a mistake, Chief. He looked suspicious. Nobody told me he was the governor." "A mistake," the chief barked. "His lawyer is on the way, and there's a mob of reporters outside. If you don't want your name splashed across every news outlet in the country, release him and apologize. Immediately." But Cross, stung by his own pride, wasn't ready to back down. He smirked and hung up, thinking he could still salvage the situation. Moments later, the governor's assistant arrived at the station, demanding Walter's immediate release. The crowd outside swelled, and cameras captured every moment. Walter, seated in his cell, watched the chaos unfold with quiet detachment, knowing the truth was about to come to light. Cross stood at his desk, feeling the pressure mount. He faced a choice: admit his mistake or stubbornly hold his ground. The police station buzzed like a beehive. Phones rang incessantly, the crowd outside roared, and journalists clamored for comments. Cross paced between his desk and the window, feeling his grip on the situation slipping away. At that moment, a man in a sharp suit entered the station. Jonathan Reed, Walter's lawyer. "Where is Governor Jameson?" Reed's voice was cold and cutting. "I demand his immediate release." Cross frowned, still not fully grasping the gravity of the situation. "Governor?" he muttered. "This must be a mistake. That man handed me suspicious documents." "This man," Reed interrupted, holding up Walter's official identification, "is your new governor. You've just insulted, humiliated, and unlawfully detained the elected leader of this state." Cross opened his mouth to defend himself, but Reed cut him off again. "I want a formal apology in front of the press, right now," Reed demanded, gesturing toward the station doors, where the crowd's shouts echoed. "If you don't, I'll file a lawsuit for abuse of power." Before Cross could respond, the police chief stormed into the station, his face flushed with anger. He marched up to Cross, fixing him with a furious glare. "William," he said, barely containing his rage, "do you realize what you've done? Release the governor immediately." Cross, finally grasping how far things had spiraled out of control, walked to the holding cell in silence. He unlocked the door and, avoiding Walter's gaze, mumbled, "You're free to go." But the matter didn't end there. As Walter stepped onto the station's front steps, he was met with a sea of cameras and microphones. He raised his hand, signaling for silence. "Today's incident is not about my status or position," he began, his voice calm but resolute. "It's about a system that allows events like this to happen again and again. I'm grateful to everyone who captured this moment and helped shine a light on the problem." His speech spread across social media within minutes. Videos of Cross tearing up the documents and his reluctant apology to Walter went viral, sparking widespread outrage. Calls for police reform flooded in, with citizens demanding systemic changes. Inside the station, Cross watched the events unfold from a window, feeling his world crumble. His pride and career now hung by a thread. He understood that this day would not only redefine his life, but also signal a turning point for the entire system. After Walter Jameson's release, events unfolded rapidly. His speech outside the police station immediately caught the attention of national media, and the next day, headlines declared, "Governor faces police misconduct head-on." The incident became a catalyst for mass protests against bias in law enforcement. At an emergency city council meeting, Walter proposed sweeping reforms. His initiatives included a review of police procedures, mandatory sensitivity training on racial issues, and the establishment of an independent commission to investigate abuse of power. "This isn't personal vengeance," Walter stated, looking directly at the police chief. "It's a necessity. If we want a fair society, we must start with the systems designed to protect its citizens." Under mounting public pressure and the media spotlight, the administration approved his proposals. But William Cross did not escape the fallout. He was temporarily suspended, and an internal investigation uncovered numerous complaints about his behavior that had been ignored in the past. Soon after, Walter invited Cross to a private meeting. The atmosphere in the governor's office was heavy with tension. Cross, avoiding Walter's gaze, still clung to remnants of his arrogance. "Officer Cross," Walter began, "I don't hold a grudge. I understand that you're a product of a system that has ignored fairness for far too long. But I believe people can change. Will you commit to training and support our reforms?" Cross was stunned. He had anticipated anger, not an offer for redemption. After a brief pause, he replied quietly, "If it means I can make things right, I'm willing." Work on the reforms began immediately. Police departments across the state introduced new training programs, and independent investigations uncovered deeply rooted issues. People who had previously been too afraid to speak out started sharing their stories. A year after the incident, at a ceremonial event, Walter presented the first report on the reform initiatives. Standing before an audience that included Cross, now working in the police department's community relations unit, Walter delivered his address. "This past year has shown us that change is possible," he concluded. "But our work is just beginning." The applause was deafening. Walter and Cross's story became a powerful example of overcoming injustice and a symbol of how transformation is possible when there is a commitment to change and progress.